What's up everyone, Alex here. It is with great pleasure to let you all know that I was invited to attend the Seattle performance of Distant Worlds Music from Final Fantasy by Square Enix, and I want to share with you the magic and the pageantry and the excitement that went into just the production of this amazing touring, I don't know what you call it, like touring concert, touring performance. I don't really know. I don't attend a lot of live events, but when I do, they're usually really good. And let me tell you this, the 2024/2025 tour of Distant Worlds, I feel like this is serendipity. This is like, it's so difficult to describe because I feel like of all the Distant Worlds that I could have attended, this was the one that was for me. Like, it felt like it was just made for me, and I'll tell you more about it in a little bit. But before we continue, I want to see a show of virtual hands from you all if you were in Seattle this past weekend watching Distant Worlds. So post your thoughts in the comments below, share your favorite set lists and tracks and performances from that evening, and if you had any sort of memorable moments from this event, or better yet, if you've attended any sort of previous Distant Worlds or live video game tour, any of them in the past, I'd like to know and read about them in the comments below. But before I begin, there are two things that I want you to know about, like, what you're about to watch. So this is going to be divided into two parts, one being the trip going all the way up to Seattle, because I feel like that sets the stage for what's about to happen in the evening. And I promise that that section is a lot shorter than the actual performance itself. And second of all, a lot of the performance footage that I am using in this video were not taken by me. A lot of it is actually taken from footage from the Eorzean Orchestra, as well as the trailer for the Blu-ray for the Distant Worlds concerts. Needless to say, I will share with you why exactly I didn't take any sort of footage of the performance whatsoever later on, but I wanted to just kind of put that out there just in case like you were expecting to actually experience the whole show or something in this video. Additionally, it is 90 degrees in this room. Like, my air conditioning is trying its best to keep everything cool, and despite that, it is still pretty hot in here. So if you actually hear like a fan in the background as noise, it's actually literally right to my right, and I just apologize in advance if that bothers any of you. Last but certainly not least, the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I've always believed that being able to take you with me on these fun journeys and trips, that have everything to do with gaming is just going to be like really fun and exciting, and hopefully encourage and tell you that there's so many of us out there who play video games, but also enjoy a night at the gala all dressed up and listening to some really well-arranged video game music. With all that said, let's just jump right into the trip. So we actually left Portland at around 11 a.m. and typically the trip from Portland to Seattle takes about 2.5 hours. But because this is a Saturday, our performance was actually at 8 p.m. Saturday evening. It took us about a little over 3 hours. So eventually we got there at about a little bit after 2 p.m. What's really cool about this journey from Portland to Seattle is that we get to see a lot of really cool natural wonders. Like, for example, the Columbia River, which basically acts as a border between Washington State and Oregon State. And it's this huge river that basically goes from all the way from the west, from the Pacific Ocean, all the way to the east. And it is so huge and it's so freaking amazing that there are so many bridges to cross it. And I always relish the feeling of crossing any sort of bridge that goes across the Columbia because it's just so huge. Like, it's just a massive body of water that, like, I love bodies of water and stuff. But also on the way to Seattle, we saw Mount St. Helens, we saw Mount Rainier. In the distance, of course, we weren't like going all the way to the foot of these mountains and stuff, but it's just really cool to kind of see like all these different natural wonders and stuff and just admiring nature. But our trip had a very unique soundtrack in the form of Final Fantasy mixed in with other songs from Persona or even Nier Automata. Delta, because I felt like it would be really cool to listen to game music all the way up to the actual performance and when we finally arrive in Seattle. And I think what I love about pulling into Seattle is like, you know, the feeling of exploring a fully 3D world over the shoulder camera or like in third person view. And as you're approaching the city, it just gets larger and larger and larger until you're literally looking up at the massive buildings and skyscrapers and stuff. Granted, there's a lot of like RPGs that have skyscrapers, but you know what I mean, like the massiveness of the environment around you. And that's literally like how I felt when we arrived in downtown Seattle, which was really, really cool. And so we kind of decided to scope the area around Benaroya Hall, which is where the performance was going to be held, and kind of try to meander about in Seattle. But we're kind of cheapos. We didn't really want to like pay for a lot of the expensive stuff out there. And quite frankly, there's so many people in Seattle that trying to just kind of walk around at 97-degree weather surrounded by cement and stuff like that didn't sound like a great idea. But there was like a beach that was nearby that we wanted to check out, so we checked that out. And so after walking around a little bit in Seattle, we kind of decided to travel 30 minutes eastbound to Snoqualmie Falls. These falls had like a steep drop that was really beautiful and breathtaking. Granted, there are a lot of waterfalls in the world, but this one is uniquely its own. And there was a lot of people, of course, like there's a lot of tourists. Like Saturday seems to just be like a busy tourist day. And we saw it. It was beautiful. It is gorgeous. Highly recommend checking it out. And it's only 30 minutes away from Seattle, which was really great. Naturally, we had to go because our performance was nearing its time. So we went back, and what's really crazy is that the area around Benaroya Hall, which used to have a lot of people when we were just kind of hanging around there, barely anybody on the sidewalks all of a sudden. I was like, oh, okay, that's really surprising. I was told by a friend that it's because it's a, you know, kind of like a financial district or something like that, which is why, like, you know, a lot of the clubs and stuff are actually like somewhere else, some of the bars and stuff. But needless to say, it was an easy walk from where we parked all the way to Benaroya Hall. And this is a very interesting experience that I've never really had before, which is getting our tickets via will call. Because at first I was like, okay, we're going to view this thing, and don't I get like a digital ticket or something? And my friend at Square Enix is like, no. It's you know, it's physical, and it's great. I love physical stuff. So I've never had will call before, so I didn't really know what the concept of will call was. So when I was looking at where the tickets are and stuff like that, I was looking for the will call window. I approached them, gave them my ID, and I was handed this really fancy envelope with our tickets in it. So I took a picture of it. I even posed with it, of course, online. You guys saw the photo. Just purely getting those tickets felt like there's something magical that's about to happen. And so we basically got our tickets scanned and we walked right into the hall. And it's so packed with people that the merch line basically went from the merch tables all the way back to like where the restrooms are, and it stretched all the way to the end of the hall, which was really crazy. Like, how many of you have actually attended like expos and stuff where there's like lines everywhere? For the younger people, I'm pretty sure you guys are okay with lining up for a long time. I'm 45 years old. I need to sit down. And eventually, the hall's open. You walk right into this gorgeous, acoustically impressive hall with so many tiered seats on the side. And even just walking in there and observing everybody is like dressed up to the nines. Like, there's some really beautiful people, gamers, or who are also like cosplaying different characters that they love from the history of Final Fantasy. It's just really an amazing experience being surrounded by all these wonderful people. But the biggest surprise for me actually happened not during the show, but before the show. You see, when my wife and I sat on our seats, I was like, all right, cool. It was like an aisle seat, row Y, orchestra in the middle, really cool seats. There's this one guy, black hair, curly, I think, with glasses, white shirt. We gotta let people through us and stuff because their seats are over there to the right. We stood up. He was like in between my wife and I. And he said, hey, you're Backlog Battle. And of course I was like kind of startled. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And I said, yeah, that's me. He's like, oh, I love your videos. I watch them all the time. And so he shook my hand and off he went. And I was like, wait a minute, I didn't get his name. And my wife is like, you just got recognized in public. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I was. Like, I was still in shock that I didn't really process the situation like really quickly, because I was like, I'm just here to watch some Final Fantasy music, right? And that's when I posted that social media post asking and telling that person, like, maybe hopefully like, hey, why don't we, I don't know, maybe in the intermission or something like that, tell me your name or something. And I guess it was only like about a day later or so that they saw the community tab post, and that's when they responded. But either way, it was nice meeting you. And I also want to say, like, there was 2 other people apart from this person who were actually at the Distant Worlds concert. And one of them even said, like, I thought I recognized your hat. And I'm like, yes, next time, pull me aside and say hi. Needless to say, after all is said and done, everybody sat down, the lights dimmed, and everybody went quiet. And the very first song that they played with conductor Arnie Roth, who, by the way, is the founder of the production studio that holds these tours and the record studio that releases the Blu-rays and the merch for the Distant Worlds on behalf of Square Enix, started the event with the Final Fantasy Prelude, because why the heck not? This is immediately followed by Final Fantasy VIII's Liberi Fatali, which is a great way to kind of inject really high energy into this concert. And it was great. Like, hearing that live is an absolute treat, regardless of how you feel about Final Fantasy VIII. And it is so amazing that it almost felt like I was playing the game right there. And the reason why that is because Distant Worlds actually has a big screen where they show gameplay footage of the games that are being showcased. And for Final Fantasy Prelude, of course, that was like the entire history of Final Fantasy. Liberi Fatali, of course, is being played in the opening movie of Final Fantasy VIII. So there's that montage that was playing right there. Afterwards, Arnie Roth basically greeted us and welcomed us to the event, while also acknowledging the fact that Masayoshi Soken, who is the composer of Final Fantasy XIV and XVI, was also in attendance. And then he drops the bomb that I did not expect him to drop, which is that this tour of Distant Worlds for 2024 and the rest of 2025 is based on 3 games, which means these 3 games will be featured prominently compared to the rest of the Final Fantasy games. And that starts with the 1-year anniversary of Final Fantasy XVI, the release of Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail. I should be clear that they are not playing anything from Dawn Trail because that's just spoilers. And the last game ultimately is, like, to me, the biggest deal out of everything, because it is my absolute favorite Final Fantasy of all time. It is the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy VI. Now, I know some of you are kind of like, oh my God, yes, that was my reaction when I heard that. I looked over to my wife and I'm like, oh my God, this is like the best thing. So, needless to say, I was like super excited. I wanted to hear everything. Unfortunately, Final Fantasy XVI's soundtrack is the one that I have the least amount of familiarity with. And I was like, we'll see if we still get to enjoy it. And then to kind of cap that off, like that whole sequence of Arnie, no Final Fantasy would be complete, he said, without this. And then instantly they played the victory theme, which was a cheap pop. And that was great. Everybody laughed. It was then followed by the performance for Final Fantasy IV's Battle with the Four Fiends, Final Fantasy X's Xanarkand, and Final Fantasy IX's Vamo a la Flamenco. Battle of the Four Fiends is a staple of Distant Worlds. It's featured in like almost every single Distant Worlds concert out there. Fantastic. Like, the orchestration and arrangement of that is great. It is memorable. It is just beautiful. Very much like continues the pace that Liberi Fatali started at the beginning of the show. And then we slow things down with Xanarkand, which is my favorite Final Fantasy X song. And there are flourishes, there's beautiful melodies that just kind of carried you through. They showed so much really cool footage of Final Fantasy X, which, by the way, in case you're worried about it, No spoilers, because much like how I make my reviews, a lot of the footage that they use is out of context. Sometimes it's in the beginning of the game, sometimes it's all the way at the end. So you're never like spoiled with anything. You can just enjoy the music and enjoy that and pair that with the visuals as well. But yeah, like, you know, Xanarkand is like just haunting. It really encapsulated that pilgrimage of that game. So it's really beautiful. And then Vamos a la Flamenco, Final Fantasy IX, was accompanied by, of course, somebody playing the guitar. They actually like invited this guy to play the guitar, which is of course part of the orchestra. And it was beautiful. Like every single string plucked echoed across the hall. Like the acoustics just kind of really highlighting every single fret being pressed, and just the whole orchestra supporting that and building it up. It was just such a fantastic treat that I've never heard of this song played with this passion before. And it's such a cool performance of this song. Then we get into Final Fantasy XIV. They played 4 songs: Song of Salt and Suffering, Tomorrow and Tomorrow, Flow, and The Final Day. Now, I realize that a lot of Final Fantasy fans are not familiar with Final Fantasy XIV's music, so I will do my best to convey, without spoilers, what these really are all about. Very quickly. Song of Salt and Suffering was from Stormblood, and this was actually playing like towards the end of that expansion storyline. Stormblood was all about war and reclaiming land that you've lost because of this imperial force that has occupied this nation for a very long time. In a way, like if there's one word to sum up Stormblood, it's revolution. And the Song of Salt and Suffering kind of takes you through that emotional journey of being lost because your country is in occupation, and eventually winning and overcoming hardship and oppression and winning against all odds. That's the summary for that song. Tomorrow and Tomorrow, on the other hand, is one of my personal favorite Final Fantasy XIV songs. This is what many call Emet-Selch's theme from Shadowbringers, and it's basically a celebration, almost a graduation in some of the feel of like the melody of the song, almost like celebrating the people that we've met along the way, all our friends, new friends, old friends, the ones that have passed on. And that kind of really teared me up a little bit, because something that I've shared with you guys, like last year, my friend Chris passed away like in 2018. It was like one of my closest friends ever. And he would have loved to see and, you know, experience this kind of tribute to all those people who have shaped us throughout our lives. And Tomorrow and Tomorrow was sung by Amanda Ashen, and she did such a moving performance that you could tell that through her facial expressions, through her emotions, body language and everything. And as her voice gets carried across the entire auditorium, there's just this aria that filled the air, and I could see like in people's reactions that they were in sheer bliss and also very heightened emotion, because a lot of players from Final Fantasy XIV are also in the crowd. And so there were some really joyful moments that they showed from the game, and you know, it's just a moving piece, and it's absolutely fantastic. As if that wasn't enough, they followed it with Flow, and Flow is very similar in feel. Flow talks about this entity that has been with you throughout the entirety of your Final Fantasy XIV journey, several expansion packs in. We're talking about a story that was built across 10 years, if you can believe it. And of course, the people who have played for a long time actually had the strongest resonance with this piece. Once again, this was sang by Amanda Ashen, and she did such a fantastic job embodying the piece and almost becoming the character that this song is actually acknowledging and talking about. And it's so gorgeous, and it's almost like the harmony and the melodies and the percussion were all coming together, and it was like sparkling alongside Amanda's outfit, like in tune with the song almost. And it just wrapped the entire like hall with such beauty and melody that even if you weren't a fan of Final Fantasy XIV and you never played it, you would have been swept anyway. That's how good Amanda Ashen did for that one. The final song is The Final Day, and The Final Day is essentially a montage of every single popular Final Fantasy XIV theme out there, including one that's called Big Fat Tacos, not the actual name. So if you're curious about it, just YouTube Big Fat Tacos Final Fantasy XIV, and you will learn what I'm talking about here, because I think it's better if you actually look for it. But being able to listen to all the themes, I'm not going to contextualize as to why there's such a thing, is a medley of all these wonderful songs that we've heard over the past several years. And it's a great encapsulation of this 10-year arc, because in case you didn't know, Endwalker, the previous expansion, finished that 10-year arc. And that's a big deal, because that storyline, done. We're starting a new story with Dawn Trail. Now, the next song, according to the set list, is Chocobo Medley. That actually didn't happen. We actually went into intermission right away. Whether or not Chocobo Medley will appear in a future Distant Worlds, who knows? But we basically went into a 30-minute intermission. Now, two things came to mind when the intermission happened. One, I've always thought about Final Fantasy fans as some of the nicest people that I've ever met in my entire life. Sure, there are, bad agents here and there. You always meet those. But the majority of people who love Final Fantasy really genuinely love it from the bottom of their heart. And that made me think of a lot of negative comments that I've been getting about Final Fantasy lately, about how all of a sudden they have abandoned their identity because they've been moving from turn-based to action gameplay over the years and this and that, and how these comments are really coming from people who are just loud, right? I understand that Western society kind of encourages us to kind of speak our voice and all that, but what's really interesting about this place, that night, or even any night that has a Distant Worlds concert, it is an extreme concentration of hardcore Final Fantasy fans who aren't loud, who actually love the series and don't feel at all like they need to voice their love for the series, because in their heart of hearts, Final Fantasy has been a part of their lives for the better part of their life. For the lack of a better term. And I feel the same way. I was surrounded with so many people who are cosplaying their favorite characters. Every single conversation, chatter around me talked about their favorite Final Fantasies, their favorite songs in Final Fantasy, their favorite moments. And it was just intoxicating. It was so cool. Compared to any other expo, anything like that, this is a concentration of people who love Final Fantasy and genuinely love so. In fact, I heard that in a statistic that out of 10 people, one person will be loud enough to express their complaints, while the other 9 will stay silent, because those are the people who actually love Final Fantasy. And the funny thing about the statistic is that you can apply this to any sort of fandom, showing that the minority isn't representative of the majority. And in that particular case, every single Final Fantasy was beloved by everybody. I just wanted to share that. Second of all, I wanted to talk about the idea of recording footage on your phone to capture a live performance. Now, I don't want to be your dad or your uncle and be like, hey, you can't do that and stuff, but as somebody who basically took photos a lot of my trip to Paris when I was young, I was 24, 25 years old or something like that, I immediately regretted just living behind the lens, because I felt like I wasn't present in those moments when I visited that city. And I feel like when you're always behind the screen to capture important events in your life, I feel like it's no different than watching these events unfold online through video. The beauty of live performance is that every single live performance, regardless of the set list, the similarities of playthrough or whatnot, there's always a minor difference from that performance and what comes after and what comes before. And that's what makes live performances truly unique. And I'm not even talking about mistakes or anything like that. I'm just talking about just a unique identity that is imperfect but beautiful. And I think that's one of the things that I love about live performances, even though I don't attend a lot of these. It kind of reinforces what I said earlier, where I feel like this moment, this Distant Worlds was made for me, because the performances that everybody in the orchestra is doing is all just for all of us who is sitting down at that particular moment in time. Yes, you can very well, if you wanted to, sure, record performances. That is your prerogative. But there is such a thing as like being present in that moment, feeling the rumble of the bass, and just hearing all of these instruments echo across you and around you. That is just something that a phone footage will never, ever replicate. So we're in part 2 of the show, and that basically started the Final Fantasy VI segment of the show. Now, unlike Final Fantasy XIV, they only featured 2 songs from Final Fantasy VI, but they are the best ones. We're talking about Searching for Friends, which plays while you're looking for your friends. I mean, it's literally the title. And the one that I really want to talk about is Dancing Mad. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, but that requires a pipe organ, right? Well, they did install a pipe organ, which is really, really cool. But the problem is that the pipe organ was set up behind the screen, so only a select few people could actually see the pipe organist playing behind the screen, which is kind of problematic, if I'm being honest. I kind of felt bad for the organist, because I'm like, who else can see you? There's like a few people that can, but thankfully, he played really well. The performance of Dancing Mad was fantastic. I will tell you, hearing the pipe organs, notes just echo across the hall is so beautiful. The acoustics of that place is just fantastic. And just all of the symphonies and all of the melodies and all of the instruments just kind of playing. It just came together in such a beautiful way that I don't even know how to describe it, apart from the fact that Dancing Mad, this arrangement was just absolutely gorgeous. That mixed with Searching for Friends and all that gameplay, you know what? It's the game's 30th anniversary. I've been sitting on a playthrough of Final Fantasy VI since last year when Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster came out on the Switch. I think I'm going to review it for you guys, because I want to gush about my favorite Final Fantasy. I want to absorb as much of what everybody else is saying about Final Fantasy VI. I think this is the year that I'm going to review it. So this was followed by Final Fantasy VII Aerith's theme. I don't know why I can't pronounce it. And that's a classic. That's also part of a lot of Distant Worlds. And keep in mind that they used original footage of the original PlayStation 1 release of Final Fantasy VII, because Arnie also shared that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's concert series is starting in August and stretching all the way across the entirety of 2024. This is why Seattle is the last stop for Distant Worlds this year, and then it'll resume in January in Los Angeles. That's why. And I actually can't wait for that one. Portland never gets any of these things, and so I just love the idea of even more beautiful Final Fantasy VII music that's going to be out there. So stay tuned for that if it's coming out to your city, so just keep an eye out on that. But yeah, Aerith's theme is beautiful. It's classic. It's haunting. It's everything that we've known Aerith to be and then some. Really honoring the legacy of that character and really just taking us on that journey, because most of us know what happens to Aerith, and all the footage that showed pretty much reinforced that idea. The next one is Vals di Fantastica by Yoko Shimomura for Final Fantasy XV. What's really cool about this is that this is an exclusive arrangement of Vals di Fantastica that Yoko Shimomura actually arranged for Distant Worlds. And so it was even grander and bigger than what the game had. Even though you could recognize the tunes, this waltz was really moving, and of course they had to start and end it with the 4 guys just pushing the car, because you can run out of gas in the game, of course. And it just felt so good, and such a great tribute to that game because of how larger than life it was, and made me realize how much I really enjoyed that game. In fact, it made me want to play that game too. I don't know if I will. I just wanted to kind of put that out there because I was like, I was like sitting in my chair. I'm like, I did enjoy Final Fantasy 15. You're right. And then the next section was dedicated to Final Fantasy 16, which I had a tough time with because I didn't know what these names and titles of songs were in relation to the songs themselves. So I literally sat down, all 4 of these songs, like just I was basically trying to figure things out with my ear. And the songs that they played were Away, Ascension, My Star, and Find a Flame. My Star included Amanda Ashen. They basically invited her back to the stage to sing that song, which is a great performance altogether. But of the 4, my favorite is Ascension, for the many reasons that it's epic. It very much lifts like the whole mood of like the entire concert and just is very like almost actiony without it being actiony, and it's just really shows the kind of depth of composition that Soken has, separate from Final Fantasy XIV, because like Final Fantasy XIV is like his full-time job, right? And then 16 is kind of like a side project when, he's not working on the Final Fantasy XIV expansions. Nonetheless, like he did such a fantastic job with all 4 compositions that even though I didn't know their names, it was immediately like, okay, I remember that scene. I played that. And it was just such a treat, like listening to Final Fantasy XVI orchestrated in this way. And you can probably imagine that like Soken himself arranged these pieces so that the Distant Worlds concert can actually perform them live for everybody. And every single person erupted in cheer because they love Final Fantasy XVI, despite the fact that it seems like a lot of people on the internet didn't like it. And that to me is like what I was talking about. These are hardcore fans who love Final Fantasy. And I've met a lot of people who are just really, really cool about it. And they were like, yeah, dude, like I'm playing through the DLC right now. It's really amazing. And if you haven't played those DLCs, highly recommend them because you thought the main game was easy. Oh boy. These DLCs are pretty fun. It'll really test your mettle. Really cool. So the show ended with the Final Fantasy main theme. And what's really cool about the video presentation, apart from the credits roll, is that it was shown against a white background. And they showed silhouettes of all 16 characters in Final Fantasy history from like 1 to 16, from the Warrior of Light to Clive in Final Fantasy 16, and and just the way that the silhouettes were, it's like they had like god rays like kind of coming off of their silhouettes, and it was just so gorgeous. It was like really reminded me of how much love and memories and nostalgia that we have for all these characters. I played all 16 of them. I mean, as they were showing like the characters, memories of these games started flooding all over me. I was like, okay, this is really intense and very tearful and emotional because it's Final Fantasy. There's 16 games in the series. And it was just such a beautiful way to end the show. Until there was an encore. And Arnie Roth basically came out again to address the crowd, thank the crowd, and say that it wasn't for us, there wouldn't be Distant Worlds, there wouldn't be Final Fantasy. And then he said he found the fitting song to end the night with, which is One Winged Angel, which required us to memorize one word, Sephiroth. And of course, he sang it alongside, the choir, to the point where Arnie got so into the song that he accidentally threw his baton, and he just said, okay, whatever, and just kept on conducting without the baton. And it was just so funny. It was so exciting. And just feeling everybody's energy while they were shouting Sephiroth. I could see people with big smiles on their faces as they're singing along with the song. And it was just such a magical night that I'll never forget it. Again, sure, there's a lot of really cool Final Fantasy songs, but the fact that tonight we were celebrating the 30th anniversary of my favorite Final Fantasy of all time, to me, that was just absolutely wonderful. That was a dream come true, I would say. But anyways, I want to hear what you think about all of this. Are you going to go to like a Distant Worlds concert? Have you been to any of the Square Enix concerts at all, or a video game concert whatsoever? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below, what you'd recommend, what I should be on, looking out for in terms of like these live events. And I want to hear what you think, because I think that these live events, more so than the big conventions and whatnot, are a great way to experience the fandom of your favorite series, whether it's Persona, Nier, or even like Final Fantasy. Because I'll tell you what, like, there were so many cool Final Fantasy fans out there that I wish I could have talked to every single one of you. But alas, this 3-hour performance isn't enough time to get to know every single one of you. And next time you see me, tap my shoulder and ask for, I don't know, like a photo or something like that, because chances are I'll probably say yes. Just don't do it in the middle of the performance, okay? Speaking of Final Fantasies, I did rank all 16 Final Fantasies. I don't know if you've seen that video, like right here. I'm linking it right now. Like I said, like my number 1 was Final Fantasy VI. How does the rest of the 15 games stack up? Check that out, and thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.